Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thanks so much for those of you who could be here on the live. My name is Michelle King with Michelle King Coaching and the Magicking Center. I know this was kind of a last minute idea to do this class. I was actually doing a YouTube series and I was like, you know what, I want to do a class, and I know this was kind of last minute, so yay. I appreciate those of you who could be here. I see some of you guys are still kind of logging in. I'll just say feel free to use the chat box there. And if you'd like to address it to everyone, that'd be great. That way everyone gets your message. You can share where you're tuning in from, or maybe where you are on the spiritual path. You know, what brought you here today. I'm excited to engage with you. So I'm totally open to, start a conversation about this. So if there are, certain questions that you have, if you're curious, where you are progressing on the spiritual path, which we'll be talking about today, feel free to share, and know that this is a sacred container and I support you, and I will do my best to guide you in all the ways that I can. And obviously, you have all the resources within you, and it's helpful to know and to be able to highlight where we are progressing, right? So that helps to free up energy, or actually expand. So anyway, let's get started. As you know, I'll be highlighting 7 ways to know that you are making progress on the spiritual path, some of which may surprise you. But ultimately, all of this so that you can harness your unique experiences as fuel, lighten up your load, and embrace your soul's evolution with enthusiasm. And I feel like that is so important when we're navigating advanced transitions and upgrades. It's so easy to forget that, this is our soul's evolution, our soul's journey. And I feel like these little nuggets will help to, catalyze that enthusiasm, catalyze accelerated momentum, and, catalyze that spark of fire that, keeps us going, keeps us inspired, keeps us, creating and producing and alive and well, so to speak. And I'd also like to share a simple, subtle, yet profound technique to transform patterns of the past into new potential. I know this has been super helpful for me. It's super easy, super simple. And it's just a matter of bringing awareness to this. So I will definitely explore this with you at the end after I share those, 7 ways to know that you're progressing on the spiritual path. And then at the end, we'll have Q&A. But again, I'm going to keep this open today. I'm not going to do any slides. I do have my notes here, so if you see me reading, that's why. But if you do have questions, I've got the chat box open, so feel free to chime in at any point if there's anything that resonates or you want to share or add to or have a question about. Yeah, go ahead. I open that up to you. So, all right. Progress. What is progress? Really, it's our relationship with progress, right? So we want to start there. We want to start to bring consciousness, awareness to our relationship with progress. I know for me, I always felt so much pressure about progress. Like, maybe that's part of the perfectionist in me, or the, high achiever in me, or the one who wants to get it right, or, these are all stories that, I've explored. But ultimately, I looked this up, and in Latin, it comes from pro, which means forward, and gradi, which means to walk. So to walk forward, to step forward, to advance, so to speak. But what's so interesting about that, I found that so linear, and what I've come to learn and realize about progress is it's expansive, it's dynamic, it's multifaceted, right? And it can be as simple as a shift in perspective that catalyzes this domino effect of absolute potential and change for new realities, which is really important to highlight because it is super subtle. And what's so ironic, or the paradox in progress, we think it's this external movement, right? But what's so cool about this is if we can shift and realize that it's the going inward, right? Progress is actually created or materialized or realized in the 3D. The more that we go inward, the more that, we move inside, not externally. So taking that quantum leap, that deep dive within yourself will initiate expansion, if that makes sense. So that's why I really am excited to share this class with you today, or, go over this with you guys today. And, I've often also found that progress is in the process. And so often we're looking for the major breakthroughs to be, the validation of our progress. But I've, come to realize too that it's the choices and the actions that we make, the stepping stones that ultimately align us with those breakthroughs. So taking all that into consideration as you explore your relationship with progress, what that represents to you, being curious about that, and also inviting, curiosity as I share today and go over these 7 ways to know that you're progressing on the spiritual path. And there's so many more. I actually came up with a whole bunch. I'm like, well, maybe I'll do a part 2 because there's just so many ways. So I'm just going to highlight 7 today. But again, in anything that I share and anything that I offer or coach, or teach, I always invite you to explore your personal experiences, right? These are just from my experiences on my personal journey, as well as working with clients, and what often shows up as this kind of like subtleties, especially as you're navigating advanced transitions and upgrades, because, these things become more subtle in nature, the progress, the shifts, because you have already cultivated a level of expansion rooted in peace and awareness. So a lot of you already are super aware, hyper aware. You've done lots of self-development and mastery, right? So you've been in this field of healing and working energetically, exploring the psychology of things, the story of things. But now that you're moving to meet life more energetically and merging with your soul nature, these levels of progress will be more subtle in nature, not so drastic as, maybe when you first, stepped on to the spiritual path with awareness, right? Intention. And, maybe that happened through, like for me, it was divorce that activated and initiated, my journey, basically. But we're always on the path, right? It's whether we are aware of it or not. And that varies in degrees too, right? So we're always navigating exactly where we're supposed to be. And when we can cultivate a conscious relationship and partnership with progress, we can resource that as fuel, right? So, so here are the 7 ways. First is, and this may be surprising, it's really your ability to acknowledge and validate your progress on the spiritual path. I like to think of this as a life review. I know for me, I can have like vivid life reviews sometimes before I go to bed or in a meditation or when I'm driving, it's like random moments, right? Or you can do it with intention and sit down with it and kind of review an observation of this as, the experiencer and the observer. But it is so essential to the mastery and magicking process. This is like the foundation of the enrichment aspect of your soul, because you're looking at your life from an observer perspective. And in that life review, it's like the light bulb moments. You're connecting the dots. You're starting to see, where you are in life, how you got there, the dynamics between your family, the culture, the programming, and so forth. And, there's a really cool example. A client recently was sharing how she had these journals from childhood that she had in a box. She just, knew it was there, but just wasn't really ready to unpack them. And there's so much symbolism in that. And then she just decided, it's time. She felt that pull. She felt that desire, that call. So she did. She invested in exploring a life review through these journals. And sometimes it's in meditation, sometimes it's in journals. It's unique to everyone and how this kind of life review shows up. And anyway, she had said to me, it was so powerful because she was like, she had forgotten aspects of her childhood and she went back, but she was like in relationship with her past self. And she was saying how she had fallen in love with her. It was, so moving. It moves me now to even think about it, because that is the key to unlocking the energy of your heart, the energy of your intuition and your soul's nature. It's coming from this perspective of love, of understanding, of curiosity, of power, right? Of appreciation. And in that, she realized, she came to this position point with absolute clarity of the parallels that were showing up for her in the past and in the present moment, for her to have this powerful, choice point in her life where potential lives. So your ability to acknowledge and validate your progress on the spiritual path through a life review, or, other ways. Maybe you're doubting it and then, doubting your progress, or you're like, I'm off track or something's off. And then, something synchronistically happens to validate that you are actually on track. Well, you want to be able to say, hey, I'm doing the work here. I am invested. I'm bringing consciousness to my life. I am doing the best I can with the energy and information that's available to me now. So it's like giving yourself a break, but that acknowledgement actually helps to retrain and redirect and support. You become that support system for yourself, which is really powerful and essential to this process. So it begins with you being able to acknowledge and validate, really look at it, really look how far you've come, really look at all the experiences you've had, the highs, the lows, and everything in between. And what is that, what are the nutrients that, you can immerse yourself in through those experiences, for your soul's evolution. Number 2, you are able to be present with your thoughts, feelings, emotions, life circumstances as they come and go, during the highs, the lows, and everything in between. So really it's saying you have the space to be with your whole self, your human and spiritual nature, right? And that can be really uncomfortable. But this is certainly a way to know that you are progressing on the spiritual path, because those who are maybe less aware or less invested, and again, there's no right or wrong here. I'm just saying to be able to acknowledge and validate your progress is to say, hey, look at the willingness for me to be present with myself and my thoughts, to be present with my experiences in life that are happening at this time, right? To invest in your personal fulfillment, invest in your personal freedom, in your well-being, right? To be present with that is the greatest gift you can give yourself. And ultimately, it influences how you show up with other people and in the world, right? When you can be present with the most uncomfortable things of being human, right? Our fears, our insecurities, the way that it's in our nature to compete and compare. We want to survive. That human part wants to survive. If we can be present with that, we create space for that energy to move. And it's like, as I'm doing this, it's like the heartbeat of our soul, right? It's like, hey, I'm here for you. I'm present with you, right? So being able to acknowledge and validate your presence within yourself. And I know this seems like so simple and so obvious, maybe, but it is progress on the spiritual path. The presence with yourself is probably, I don't even know, maybe the most essential to even being able to acknowledge and validate that. But the human parts of us need that. So they go hand in hand. All of these kind of work together. So, it's almost like raw vulnerability, the willingness to look at yourself in the mirror, and see the beauty that emerges, because it's like, it's not all ugly, it's not all beastly. And we can partner with those parts of us. And when we do, that's where we merge. That's where we become. That's where we are, right? Because that's the polarity, the light and the dark. And when we can be with it, we are it, we merge with it. And therefore, that's total expansion. There's no separation, right? And then we get to see ourselves in other people and through our experiences of life, which creates a liberation, a freedom, a power, authentic power, right? Because we are the source of where that energy is coming from. Number 3, another way to notice your progress on the spiritual path. You notice patterns, not problems. This is a major energetic shift. I know for me, I used to say, I have so many issues with this, or this is my problem. I used to have irregular menstrual cycles. And I knew it was, after I got into health and wellness and, studied with the Czech Institute and, moved more into the energetics, and then, working with Simone Wright. And then all of this expanded for me to say, intuition is connected with truth. Intuition is connected, with rhythm and flow. Right. And so there was an imbalance happening. And so what I realized too was that they're not problems, they're imbalances if we start to meet it energetically. So progress on the spiritual path is noticing the patterns, right? Not the problems. And if you think about where those two conversations are rooted, which one's coming from the self, the one that's in survival mode? It's looking for problems, right? To keep it safe, to keep it protected, to stay alive, which is also important, right? For our safety in some ways, like crossing the street, right? But when we're talking about, we want to keep that in mind as well. It's not one or the other, but when we're talking about the spiritual path and your growth and your evolution, catalyzing new realities, we want to notice and observe the patterns, right? So, a pattern for me that often made me shut down was, I'm trying to think of a pattern that would often make me shut down, was actually even creating content in the past. I can recall it being excruciating when I worked with a web designer and had these deadlines, which was really important for me. I needed that to be able to get it done, but it was just like, it was so hard, right? Because I really cared about what I was saying. I wanted to get it right. And I just felt like I was really wordy, and I was trying to condense all of that, right? But, going through this, I was like, here's the pattern here. What is this rooted in, right? Like, I feel it. I'm meeting this energetically. Okay, I'm going to sit with this. Cool. I'm doing it anyway. Game changer, right? So noticing those patterns. Often this shows up in relationships. That's the easiest to notice, right? But you can also discover these patterns within yourself. I know another thing for me was often when something really awesome happened in my life, right after I would get sick or something would happen. And so there was no time for celebration, right? Because there was a pattern for me that it wasn't okay to celebrate those things. So really important to start to notice the patterns and not the problems. And you can also sense that. Start to observe other people who focus on the problems and other people who focus on the patterns. And with patterns, I equate that with potential, because there's potential there for change, for transformation, for evolution, right? When we start to meet it energetically, right? Beyond the story. So feel into the patterns. What circumstances do you feel insecure? What activates, insecurity or shutdown, right? Where you feel small or you want to hide. And what wants to emerge from that? What's being invited for you to reclaim your power? It's here now. We're bringing consciousness to it. And that's where the patterns of noticing that energetic conversation will transform you, will liberate you. Okay, number 4. I love this one so much. This has been a game changer for me. I don't know if I'm just hardwired this way, but I guess there's a part of me that kind of loves a challenge, and I'm mindful of my language here, right? Because it doesn't always have to be challenging to have progress, but oftentimes, I would see potential for growth in challenge, or when I would bump into old patterns or programs that felt like a wall or a block, or if I experienced kind of like a halt in momentum, I was like, ooh, what's the opportunity here? What is this inviting me to see? So that is a sign of progress on your spiritual path. When you notice resistance, when you notice, oh, I'm feeling a block here, or I'm feeling stuck, and you bring curiosity to that as an invitation, an opportunity for potential. Because I think oftentimes, ooh, what would most people do in this circumstance? They give up, they withdraw, they stop, they don't try. Use your resources in this, right? So it's like, oh, what are my resources here? How can I create? How can I innovate? How can I resource my higher intelligence to inspire a way, move me, align me, And sometimes those moments, it's like, do nothing, because there's something inside that wants to emerge, right? So progress can also be experienced in those moments where I know this seems counterintuitive, but it's like you're bumping into a wall, you hit a block, or there's a stop in momentum. There's a pause. Can you be with that, the rhythm of that, right? It's like, ooh, there's no error here. Where's the invitation? Maybe it's for me to pause with myself and do nothing but be with myself, which is so easy to get caught up in the world today, so busy, right? In the external environment that, the universe conspires, so to speak, to say, hey, no, stop. You need to stop here and listen. What does your soul have to say? How are you feeling? Are you checking in? And, giving yourself, again, that space to be present with yourself, and maybe acknowledge how far you've come on your spiritual path. Another way to know that you're making progress on the spiritual path, number 5, is that you can appreciate, your ability to stabilize during upgrades. We know that peace is essential for stability, which is why we have the mastery process, right? Initially, we need that to be able to meet, merge, and move with those aspects of our human nature so that we can step into the fullest expression of our creative power. If we don't have that mastery process, we don't know how to stabilize, right? When we do say yes to those upgrades, maybe you're starting your own business. It's going to require power. It's going to require visibility. It's going to require actions that you've never done before. Maybe you're deciding to move to a different state or a country that puts you in a situation or circumstance that is super unfamiliar to you. It's going to activate something in you that's going to require stabilization. So I see this as training. This is opportunity to refine and develop those metaphysical muscles, right? This is how we become more skilled, more trained. Just like anything you're learning, a language, driving a car, initially there's a learning curve, right? So we can appreciate the opportunity that when we say yes to an upgrade or a transition, that there will be a time to recalibrate and strengthen that stability within ourselves. That's calling on our own resources, however that shows up and is inspired for you. We can appreciate that as training. So when you feel unstable, when you notice confusion, which is part of that recalibration phase, if you notice fatigue, if you notice overwhelm, if you notice like indecision, fear, insecurity, worry, anxiety, we can watch it, right? And we can resource it. We can sit with it. We can be with it. That's why that number 1 and number 2 are so important that I mentioned before, that presence, right? It's like, okay, I am prioritizing that inner experience here. Yay, making progress. And the more I can tune into that, harness it, embrace it, resource it, the more I expand, it's inevitable. The more that you go in, the more that you expand, the more resources I have, which creates stability in my system. It's all energy. And really all you're doing is balancing your energy. And it begins with your position of mind. And it takes practice, just like a meditation. It's like people who meditate regularly, they get familiar with the experiences of peace or different qualities, right? It's the same thing here. You're getting familiar with your training ground. You're getting familiar with your intuitive language. You're getting familiar with your adaptability and how you resource your metaphysical skills. Number 6, when it feels like a sacred relationship with your soul, like you're truly invested with your soul nature, and you appreciate the opportunity to work in partnership with the field of absolute potential, that those inspired impulses are, from your higher mind and are aligning you with fulfillment, your heart's desires, your true fire, passion, inspiration, love, compassion, courage, all those qualities of the heart, of spirit, right? Of your true nature. And so it's not like a working against yourself, but you're in partnership. And that process that's part of the mastery process of revealing that, right? Like that's the training that we get to explore. And the magicking process is what invites us into that growth and stretches us to evolve. So, and number 7, you have a vision, and at the same time, you're open to its evolution, right? Like you have your targets, you have your vision, you have your dream in mind, but you're not obsessed or attached or trying to control it. Like there's some freedom with that. There's some flow to that because you're in partnership with the field. And this comes with practice, right? So, this inner sense of peace will come as you expand because you've got more space for room or room for spirit to move. So this creative energy, this creative flow, and you're working in partnership with the higher mind. It's giving you impulses and you're carrying it through, so it's this feedback loop, so to speak. And again, the progress will be subtle. And that's, and then, once we get into this rhythm, we work in partnership with the field, and you'll notice the synchronicities and, the creative impulses and the desire for expansion, not from a pressurized place, but from a place of allowance, honor, grace, and courage, right? Oh, and curiosity. Curiosity, I would say, is probably the primary. Just curious, because in all these experiences, we get to meet ourselves, right? And grow and evolve. And, as you're becoming more spiritual in nature and navigating from the lens of your soul, the perspective of your soul, that's really where the magic happens. We're open, and it's like a dance, and you can rely on yourself. We talk about codependency, and it has such a bad rap, but what if you could be codependent on your higher wisdom, on the field? And a game changer for me was when I realized the universe has my back, and I never really like verbalized that until years later. And I could even look back to younger years, and I'm like, wow, I've always been protected. I've always been guided, but now I'm bringing intention and bringing awareness to that. And so, all of this these were all of like the stepping stones, right? That lead to those major breakthroughs that are really obvious, moments of progress or experiences of progress, right? That bring absolute clarity, or their manifestations, or their new opportunities, or, really major life altering and enhancing, aspects of your life. And so, all of the noticings, the subtleties, and you being able to acknowledge and validate that soul journey within yourself as you really evolve into and emerge, with who you really are. And in that, we explore the mastery process. And from that level of soul is where we experience true understanding, acceptance, power, because we're in tune, we're connected with that inner wisdom that's our guide, right? No longer giving that to the 3D, but that's our learning, that's our experience. So it's all essential in this integration process. So those were the 7, and I would say, like, as you even like direct your mind to look for that progress, look for the subtle progress, the inner shifts, the perspective shifts, the feelings, the sensations, the peace, the courage of stepping into new territory, even when you're scared, and to say, I'm here with you, to give that energy space and to do it again. And, one really pivotal, life-changing thing for me that really changed the dynamic of my relationship with my soul, I'll say, was when I made a conscious decision not to give up. I know that sounds super simple, but it was like do or die. That's kind of how it felt at one point. And I was like, okay, what do I got to do here? And it was to the point where I was really upset, and like to the point where I was nauseous. I'm like, whoa, what's happening here? And I had to get real with myself. And, there was a big part of me that wanted to give up because the spiritual path is challenging, right? And I made an agreement with myself that giving up was a non-negotiable. That just wasn't going to happen. And really, I was hurting those parts of me. I was dimming that light. I was putting that pressure on myself, right? Which we do sometimes, we're human. But I feel like, words have power, and our intention is so important. And when you can come to that, to know, this is a non-negotiable, we're doing this, I'm here for you. Like, this is an inner experience, right? that's the position of protection. That's the position of leadership within oneself. And in that is so much liberation and authentic power that gets to come through, and inspiration that emerges. It's like, woo, big block gone now. So let's go, right? And it was the willingness, and maybe, my history and endurance training that reminded me with the Ironman races, I'm in this, right? Like, what was it that kept me going in those races? It was my spirit. It was the non-negotiable that I created, the agreement of, I'm crossing that finish line, or I'm going to do the best I can with the energy and information I have, right? But I'm not going to give up. I'm going to do my best. I'm going to listen to my body and put one foot in front of the other. And ultimately, that is the definition of progress, right? So wherever you are on the spiritual path, I hope this was helpful. I would love to check in with you guys. Do you have any questions so far? I still want to share a little technique to support you if you find yourself in transition, you're noticing old patterns, and you want to shape new potential. So I will still highlight that for you guys. But otherwise, I wanted to check in real quick and just see if you have questions. See you guys there, and feel free to type into the chat. Or if you, how is this resonating with you? Is anything ringing true? Yeah, so the technique, this is really simple, really subtle, but it does require self-awareness, obviously, like to be able to see the pattern and position yourself at this choice point. So you're at the center, you're the observer, right? You can see the old patterns, right? And you're in the present moment as it's happening. So little technique. Once you notice it, acknowledge it. Say, I see you, I feel you, okay? And then in that moment, ask yourself, what would my old self do? What would be the pattern here? What would be my action? And simply align with what your mature self or your evolved self or your higher self would do. And there's no wrongdoing here. It's all in the experience, right? So exploring that, it's really just a choice point. It's being able to see the old pattern and consciously, deliberately choose differently in order to create a new reality, right? And the other part of that is taking action in alignment with that, because that's how we really physicalize a result. So if we just think it, that's one thing. It's like you have a dream, there's something you want to do, it will remain a thought until you take action, obviously. So, but sometimes we need that reminder, and you can explore that. Yeah, you can play with that. So it shows up in many ways. So noticing the old patterns, and then choosing differently. And then if you're unsure, use your intuition to explore and experiment. Say, hey, okay, set this intention, show me the truth, and then go out, have an experience, come back and use that wisdom to guide you next time. Okay, because these are all experiences, right? So yay. I hope this was helpful for you guys. Again, I could go on and on about, all these ways to acknowledge, validate your progress on the spiritual path. It's not always easy. I feel like the progress is really seen in the subtle, subtle noticings and your deliberate choices, right? It's that inner experience. And when you can make a different choice, you create a different outcome. Okay, so that's alchemy, really. So anyway, all right. Well, thank you guys for being here. Again, if you have any questions, let me know. I'd be curious to know how this landed for you guys, if you care to share. super fun to connect and engage. Always curious to know where you are on the spiritual path and how I can best support you. Um, yeah, well, happy Saturday, or day whenever you view this. I appreciate your presence. I appreciate your engagement. And I look forward to next time. As always, remember, you are the source of your love, power, and truth. Thanks so much for being here today. My best to you guys.